So let's see what the original creator did. I'm going to right click, inspect element, scroll down a touch, and if we hit the magnifying glass, I can click on the image, and now can you see that he has a div with the class of post image. He has an anchor tag because you can click on the link, so we need to make sure that we add that to our markup. Then he has the image itself, and then he wraps the entire main content area within a div with the class of preview. And now what you can see here is, if we scroll back up, the post image is floated to the left. So that entire block is floated to the left. If I were to remove that, you can see how that would affect things. It would be all the way up there. And next, if we scroll down, the preview is floated to the right. And again, if I change that, you can see how that ends up. So now we're starting to understand it. And if we need to account for this margin again, and you need the specific value for some reason, remember, it's all available here. You click on it, and now we can see it's floated to the left, and margin right is 30 pixels. Okay, so let's go and update our little project here. First, margin right is not 25 like we estimated, it's 30. And secondly, this image needs to be clickable. So I'm going to add that in right now, and we'll do it right here. Now if I reload, it looks the same, but can you see that it's changed to a cursor? And when I click on that, that would take me to wherever the link was directing to. Okay, good. So now let's fix this issue right here. I'm going to come back and revise our markup now, and we're going to wrap all of our main content area within a div with a class of preview. Now notice we're not using anything specific here because we only need the div for positioning. And that's what a div is for, only for positioning. It doesn't have any semantic meaning. And now at the very end, just below the body and just below continue, I'm going to close it out. And lastly, I need to indent everything so we have nice, clean, indented markup. So if I reload the page again, remember, div has no visuals. It's only for formatting again. So now we're going to say preview float to the right. And now if I reload, you can see that it's floating to the right, but now it's placed on its own line. Now, why is this? And I guarantee this will trip you up at first because you're thinking, I'm floating to this to the right, but it seems as if it's still taking up all of the available space. And it's because a div has a default display of block. And what that means is that box is going to take up as much space as it can on the line. Right there, you see that's a huge box. That wide box is not small enough to fit up in this area, so it's forced onto its own line in order to contain that whole box. So watch what happens though if you explicitly state a width, and maybe you say 400 pixels, reload, and notice that's now floated to the right. If we remove that, you can see we have it like before. So now we are definitely floating it to the right, but it seems like it's still too small. And if I were to make that 350 pixels, now it's small enough to fit up here, so it jumps up. So now at this point, we can either return and figure out exactly what the width is, or because we're mostly estimating here, you can play around with it a little bit if you like, or you can be more mathematical. And we can say, all right, well, we have 600 pixels worth of space to work with. Next, I know my image is 200 pixels wide. All images on NetTouch are 200. So we can say 600 minus 200 is 400 pixels. But remember, we can't do 400 because we also have to factor in any padding and margin that was applied to it. In this case, we applied 30 pixels worth of padding. So 600 minus 200 is 400, minus 30 is 370, which is the exact value that we've applied here. So now I'm going to remove the background color of red because we don't need it anymore, and it's starting to look a lot better. The next step is to set our font. Here it appears that we're using Helvetica or Arial. So we'll set a font family, and you've learned this by now, of sans serif, which will default to the most appropriate font on your computer, which is again likely Helvetica or Arial. And now that's updated. Next, let's figure out what the font size is. So I'm going to right click, inspect element, and make sure I am clicking the H1, and we can go to computed styles. And if we scroll down here, we can see font weight is bold, font size is 39 pixels. So we'll do that now, and we'll say article H2, font size is 39 pixels. So a couple of things here is we are limiting this to only an H2 within an article. However, if you anticipate having lots of H2s and they all should be this font size, you should remove the article because you don't want to restate yourself over and over. And in this case, you would place it maybe at the top for your general styling. Let's reload the page, and now that's that correct size. But also, it seems like the line height is a little too high. And by line height, remember, we can specify the line height of each line. So if I reload, you can see that adjusts, If I make it a really large number, you'll see the difference there. So if we set it to 1 this is another unit of measurement. That is the width of the letter M. Or another way, again, is to go back, inspect element, and let's figure out what the computed line height is. In this case, it's 43. So notice it's just a touch higher than the font size itself, and this is fairly common. Now I'm going to reload, and that's looking good to me. The